So this is my WSIB Workwell audit presentation. Company overview. So the company is located in Burlington, Ontario, and it's been in business since 1982. The business operates a manufacturing facility for sign displays, which includes illuminated and non-illuminated, handcrafted and computer-generated products. The company is a fully equipped sign manufacturer featuring CAD-driven router tables, metal fabrication, paint booth, CAD vinyl cutters, and high-rise installation vehicles. At present, the company employs 24 people, 12 involved in manufacturing, and the remainder working in the office, sales, and marketing. Company selection. In view of the sensitive nature of the audit, the company of choice was the one that I have a close and personal connection with, as I believe this relationship would grant me a level of information access that may be unattainable otherwise. This is also a company that I have worked for before, and I'm familiar with the president, of which I continue to have a professional relationship with. Personal barriers. Most of my personal barriers to success arose from my limited knowledge and experience in performing the Workwell audit. The abilities that I do possess are more based on theory than on practice and implementation. Also, after reviewing the official Workwell document, it became apparent to me that some of the subpoints of the audit may not even be applicable to this small company, and others may have to be evaluated to a lesser extent. Due to my limited experience and basic knowledge, I foresaw potential difficulties in my ability to judge whether specific documents and processes sufficiently complied with what was legally expected. Another potential issue which I recognized early on pertained to the fact that the audit is somewhat time-consuming. Given that I was a student auditor and would have to take my time, I had concerns that whoever was helping me would get frustrated with my questions and may want to cut it short, cut corners, or rush through the audit, jeopardizing its quality and thus my learning. Organizational barriers. The business that I visited is a small sign company that competes in a cutthroat industry that is populated by national and multinational players. These facts alone may present a number of organizational barriers for success. Factors such as economics, limited resources, nature of relationship with government regulatory agencies, and lack of knowledge or qualified internal individuals may interfere with an effective implementation and maintenance of organizational health and safety program. Summary and learning reflection. The audit was performed over the course of 2 days. On the first day, I briefly talked to the management and the office staff about the general function and expectations pertaining to health and safety in the organization. On the second day, I focused my attention on the manufacturing facility itself. From the moment that I have entered the business, I was pleasantly surprised with the level of cooperation that I have received, especially in the view of the fact that I was doing this audit for a school project. I was guided through the office, introduced to key players, and taken to the lunchroom where a large bulletin board was posted with information that was applicable to the audit. While reviewing the company's health and safety policy manual and employee policy handbook, I did run into a number of problems, however. Both of these resources did not fully address the topics listed under the Workwell audit. This made the process difficult and called for my interpretation of whether or not the existing policy was sufficient in the eyes of the law. This problem was not limited to a couple of points of the audit, but was prevalent throughout. I found myself constantly asking, Am I overinterpreting the requirements? And is this requirement applicable in these circumstances? I attribute this difficulty to my limited experience in the field of health and safety, coupled with the lack of any comparison. This point also illuminates the importance of examining the circumstances in an objective manner and making recommendations that are applicable to the company's specific circumstances. The second day consisted of a tour of the manufacturing facility and discussions with the shop foreman and one of the members of the Joint Health and Safety Committee. Surprisingly, I felt more confident in the role of a student auditor on my second day in the company, perhaps in part due to the fact that I felt more familiar with the company structure and their health and safety policies already. While overall, all individuals were forthcoming with information, I did make an interesting observation when speaking to the shop foreman. In fact, I found him to be defensive at times, especially when I felt that my own examination of the written policies did not provide me with sufficient information and I was asking questions for further details. The prevailing message that I was repeatedly given was, "We are a small company," implying that regulations that are in place in the Workwell audit somehow did not pertain to them. His responses and the perceived defensiveness were extremely challenging for me. Although I recognized that the questions were coming from a regulation and not me personally, I believe the foreman took them very personally. The idea that there were somehow shortcomings in the procedures that were in place at the company appeared to strike a nerve and necessitate excessive explanations. While in this circumstance I was merely a student doing a project, I imagine that as an inspector posing a difficult question, I might have been perceived as a threat instead of an aid to improve the existing system. Reflecting on the entire process of the Workwell audit, I am satisfied with the way I have arranged it. I believe that the ground research that preceded my actually carrying out the project highly contributed to me being able to ask appropriate questions, make correct observations, and suggest recommendations to improve the health and safety program. However, in considering possible improvements, I acknowledge that my recommendations were somewhat limited. Specifically, while I was able to identify the areas in need of revisions, with my limited knowledge, I was not able to provide a roadmap for the company in how these changes would be best attained. I believe that this information would not only be useful for the company, but also make the entire process more valuable for them and me.